Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose, and it's been somewhat of an odd week in the sense that we've gotten a lot of next-generation news for PlayStation and Xbox. I mean, in some ways, it kind of feels like this generation has barely begun for their current consoles. Maybe they should focus on that. But if you look at past generations, it is right around this time when plans start to leak out. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to release within the next year, but we start to at least get an inkling of what their plans will be. Now, a lot of this could still change between now and then, but we saw that earlier this week with Xbox as some of their next generation plans leaked out. If you missed that video, go check it out. We talked about their next consoles, and now we're also getting some early looks as to what Sony is planning for the PlayStation 6. Now, on one side, a bit of disaster struck Sony. There was definitely some controversy around this one. But on the other side, there is some exciting news as well. So make sure to stay tuned, and we'll talk about both of those today. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and I truly, truly do appreciate you. Let's just go get right into things, though, starting off with Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I mean, this really was one of the big standout AAA games for 2025. I mean, for me personally, I really just appreciated how different it is compared to a lot of other AAA games on the market, and it doesn't just try to emulate everything else. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily for everybody per se. It's a slower paced game that emphasizes stealth more so than guns blazing. This is not an action-driven game for the most part, but it's a really good game for what it aims to do, and personally, I thought it was a Game of the Year contender for last year. I mean, that's just all the more reason that old Jeff Keighley should probably include all 12 months of the year for his show. Just throwing that out there. But, you know, nonetheless, the reason that I'm hyping it up today is because it sounds like you PlayStation fans out there will have some official news rather imminently. The prominent Bilbo Coon posted this up over on D-Labs. According to our information, at least 2 physical editions for the PlayStation 5 of the game are planned, a standard edition and a premium edition. The availability of collector's edition is still not confirmed on our side. The game's release date is set for April 17th of 2025. The premium version will allow 2-day early access starting April 15th of 2025. Pre-orders will be launched around March 25, 2025 in Europe with the same prices as the Xbox Series versions. So if this is true, which I have no reason not to believe this, Bilbo Coon has been insanely accurate up to this point, then yeah, we should get an announcement within the next 2 weeks. In fact, an ESRB rating for the PlayStation 5 also went live here recently, which only adds further credence to this leak. Oh, and check this out. We also got some really exciting news for the all-time classic. That is Chrono Trigger. Yeah, it is its 30th anniversary, which is kind of crazy in its own right. But check out what Square Enix had to say over on Twitter. They said, as we mark the 30th anniversary for Chrono Trigger, we will be launching various projects that go beyond the world of the game over the next year to express our gratitude to everyone who has played Chrono Trigger so far. Now, keep that so far comment in mind. That could be indicating something. But they said that the latest information will be posted on Square Enix official X and Chrono Trigger PR, so please look forward to it. Now, admittedly, this comment is somewhat mysterious in the sense that, you know, these unnamed projects will go, as they worded it, beyond gaming. So that makes me think that this isn't just game-related. They could also announce something like an anime, which, I mean, could actually work out in this case. They could easily use Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball art style, considering he was the artist for Chrono Trigger. But obviously, you know, the big hope here is that whatever they're planning to do will also include something game-related. Now, again, they did say so far, so maybe that's indicating something. And if they are, they do have a few options here. I mean, if they just put absolute minimal effort into this anniversary, they could still release a pixel remaster for consoles in the same vein as what they did with Final Fantasy. I mean, it's actually kind of asinine that this all-time beloved classic isn't available on modern consoles. It's on Steam and it's also on mobile, but for whatever reason, it's not yet available on Xbox, PlayStation, or Nintendo. So maybe they'll change that and port it over to modern consoles and just kind of call it a day. But in my opinion, even that, I think, would be such a disservice for a game as beloved as Chrono Trigger. I don't know if they'll pull the trigger on this, but the best thing that I think that they could do here is to do an HD 2D remaster with full voice acting and everything. I mean, that would sell like hotcakes, but, we'll just have to kind of wait and see what happens here. If anything else, we will get more news for Chrono Trigger as the year rolls by, so just make sure to stay tuned, hit that bell notification, and as soon as we learn more, I'll let you know about it. Oh, and Xbox has a hit franchise on their hands. The Ori series has officially surpassed 15 million units sold, which is well-deserved. I mean, personally, I view it as arguably the best Metroidvania of all time. It's really between it, Metroid, Hollow Knight, and Castlevania. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of the four, but this is an incredible feat for such a small studio, and especially when you consider when they launched the first game. The studio head kind of joked that these numbers aren't too shabby because back in 2015, this was a genre that was kind of viewed as quote-unquote dead. And that might be somewhat exaggerated, but it really wasn't until Ori and Hollow Knight came along that kind of got the hype train rolling for this genre. Now, all of a sudden, the market is just flooded with new Metroidvania game after new Metroidvania game. So we can somewhat thank Moon Studios and the Ori series for doing that, as it was one of the first games that really pioneered that momentum. And to this day, there's not many within the same genre that can match its quality. Just incredible gameplay with a beautiful art style and just as a beautiful story. If you haven't already played these games, please go do yourself a favor. They are absolutely excellent. Either way, big congrats to Moon Studios, and let that kind of sink in for Microsoft as well. Maybe we should sign an Ori 3 sometime in the future. Just kind of throwing that out there. Okay, so let's go talk about what's happening with Sony and their plans for their nearest future, and also in some ways for the PlayStation 6. Yeah, by all indication, AI is going to be a big part of the future for gaming. And there's aspects to that that's exciting. But then there's also other parts of it that's a little bit more controversial. Now, we'll get into the controversial part here in just a moment, but the more exciting of the two is machine learning upscaling technology. The days of simply viewing hardware based on their specs alone is quickly becoming a thing of the past. When we start to hear about these next-generation consoles, it's not going to be just about the best GPU, teraflops, the CPU, the hard drive, this, that, and the other. A big part of next generation will center on AI upscaling methods, and we're already seeing parts of that today. Sony just launched the PlayStation 5 Pro with their own proprietary upscaling method, PSSR. Then there's the Nintendo Switch 2. And it's widely rumored to utilize NVIDIA DLSS, and that's going to be a major boon for them in getting a lot of third-party games on their hardware. Now, going back to PSSR, though, it's still within its first generation, and that ultimately means that it comes with early growing pains. PSSR isn't perfect by any stretch of the means, which is to be expected, because, AMD and NVIDIA also went through similar problems with their earlier iterations. However, AMD just announced the 4th generation of FSR, aka FSR 4. Now, it seems to be a nice upgrade, and it puts it more in line with DLSS. But apparently, and this is where things get interesting, FSR 4 was actually co-developed in association with Sony. Now, this is very important because this will be implemented into the PS5 Pro and eventually will likely improve the PS6 even more. Yeah, you can see Mark Cerny's response to this collaboration on Eurogamer. He said the neural network and training recipe in FSR 4's upscaler are the first results of the Amethyst collaboration, and the results are excellent. It's a more advanced approach that can exceed the crispness of PSSR. I'm very proud of the work of the joint team. To add, he also talked about its PS5 Pro implementation with a time frame. He said, our focus for 2025 is working with developers to integrate PSSR into their titles. In parallel, though, we have already started to implement the new neural network on PS5 Pro. Our target is to have something very similar to FSR 4's upscaler available on PS5 Pro for 2026 titles as the next evolution of PSSR. It should take the same inputs and produce essentially the same outputs. Doing that implementation is rather ambitious and time-consuming, which is why you haven't already seen this new upscaler on PS5 Pro. So in other words, the PS5 Pro will get the next generation of PSSR next year in 2026. Just like other AI upscaling methods, it will improve over time, which I think really is one of the main reasons that Sony pushed for a mid-generation refresh in the first place. In some ways, you can kind of view the PS5 Pro as a beta test for the PlayStation 6. It's a way for them to get PSSR in the hands of players. That way they can improve it drastically for the eventual PlayStation 6. Now, that's probably not going to sit right with everybody. This is a $700 to $800 console, so we would like to think that it's going to be perfect in every way, but the reality is that's just not true. There are games that display problems on a PS5 Pro because of PSSR, whereas the standard PS5 doesn't have those same issues. Now, that's one reason that I believe every game should have a toggle feature for PSSR, and whether, gamers actually want to use that feature. What I can say, though, is that the PS5 Pro has proven to be an upgrade for certain games. Monster Hunter Wilds and Deliverance 2 comes to mind, so it does have its pros as well. And thanks to this new information, those upgrades should be more noticeable as the generation progresses. PSSR 2 should launch next year. And while that seems to be a long wait for, again, a console that costs $700+, theoretically, it would still be the most powerful PlayStation console up until around 2028 when the PS6 is projected to release. Now, however, the other bit of news for PlayStation AI isn't quite as exciting, or at least depending on how you view it. If you remember right, a couple weeks ago, Microsoft announced their new AI feature, Microsoft Muse, that allows them to assimilate games, which offers certain pros like the idea of better game preservation. That seems good and all, but ultimately, this was a very controversial announcement. Anytime we talk about generative AI, there's always a concern that this could take jobs away and that it could make a project feel soulless. Well, it's not just Microsoft that's exploring these type of ideas. This is something that a lot of companies right now are exploring, and that includes Sony as well. Apparently, in a behind-the-scenes presentation that leaked online and has now been taken down, Sony revealed that they're working on AI-powered characters. They used Aloy from Horizon because, of course, Sony just absolutely loves that franchise. But nonetheless, Aloy was able to talk and respond to questions that viewers asked. It wasn't perfect per se, and we can theoretically say that it's similar to AI chatbots and what they do, and okay, that's all fair and everything. But it does stand out that Sony is exploring this idea with their PlayStation characters. This is not the first time that we've seen this idea floated around the game industry. There is this idea that AI characters can be implemented into future games, and not necessarily with main characters, but for NPCs. They can flesh them out by using AI, and they can do generative voice acting, and there's even discussions about AI side quests that can pad out games. I've heard about that. So what I'm trying to say here is that there's all kinds of different ways to implement generative AI into video games, and that's something that we're seeing here from Sony. They're exploring it as well. So the fact is that AI is a big part of the future for gaming, and we're going to see this type of stuff more frequently here in the coming years. The main question here, though, is whether or not this is a good or bad idea. So let me just hear your opinion in the comments below. What do you think about AI in gaming, specifically when it comes to generative AI? What do you think about Sony's implementation in this leaked video? And just give me your overall thoughts in the comments below. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode, but until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.